Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the EasyPower Tuesday Refresher webinar. My name is Jim Chastain. I'm with the Marketing Applications Group here. Today we're going to address methods to improve how your communications impact your target audience. And primarily that's the folks that will use the information that you collect or produce during a study. And many of the things we're going to be touching on should be considered as you start your project. So we're basically labeling this a big picture perspective, and we're trying to offer some options to you and be able to impact the final result as you complete your project. So as we do frequently, we want to start off with a poll question. So I appreciate your participation and your feedback. This morning, we want to basically, and some of this will help direct the presentation today and future presentations. So if you would please help us with some feedback to these questions. How large are the systems that you primarily work on? And we'll just take a few seconds to kind of collect the data and then share that information. And frankly, this presentation applies to all sizes, so it's not necessarily limited in that regard. So appreciate that. Let's show how the audience voted, if you will. Then the second question is, when you do a study, how frequently is device coordination required? Less of an impact here, but it can pertain to some of the information that we're going to be presenting. So again, appreciate the feedback. There's no obligation involved, and this is not really going to anybody else except our marketing department. So, all right, so here's what that looked like, and I do appreciate your participation. So let's kind of proceed with our discussion. So even though what I'm primarily going to be addressing are ways to improve the look and, if you will, presentation methodology of larger systems, it also applies to even the very first project that you may do. And if you've heard any of my presentations on the topic, I recommend before you develop a very large system, even if you have a small radial system, before you develop the whole project, draw a very simplified one-line diagram that shows a connection between the utility at the starting point and the lowest typical load that you have in your system, with the intent of verifying that you have a better feel for the mechanics of the tools, and based upon that very simplified one line, you're going to produce the results you want. And the primary reason is to make sure that as you go out to collect data on the system, you will be able to, again, get a satisfactory end goal of your report, and it won't require the visits to the site multiple times to collect the data. So that may look something like this as far as a simple one-line diagram. And if you look at this, again, what you're primarily looking for is to make sure that as we've filled in the data, we can go to the short circuit focus and fault all the buses and get labels, or at least the data required for labels, at the locations that we expect and need labels as the ultimate solution. Now, one of the things that you may want to consider even at this point is, as you're collecting data, what's the benefit of including something like digital pictures? And just as a real quick aside, EasyPower has the ability to include or attach in this collected data media gallery, attach pictures or digital images that you could take as you're collecting the data. And so simply by, in this case, I've double-clicked on the transformer, I might want to attach a picture that I've taken. So in this case, I saved all my pictures in my Acme picture file, and here's the nameplate on the transformer that I want to include, and the tool will allow me to connect this with the file, and at some point down the road I'm able to verify not only the data that was collected is accurate, but it may have additional information here that I didn't think to include when I did my data collection. Relatively simple thing, and frankly this is an interface that's automated by the on-site mobile application, but it's also very useful if I'm doing data collection manually and I want to improve my results or reduce the number of times I have to visit the site. Okay, so again, looking at even your very first project from a bigger perspective, rather than just start to draw everything out and running around collecting data without really realizing the need for it, is the bottom line recommendation. Now, from that juncture, I want to jump into maybe a reconsideration of what I could do on larger projects. And frankly, most of what follows is easier to incorporate in the project from the beginning versus trying to clean up a large project after the fact. But nevertheless, I have worked with several facility managers who've done exactly that. They've gone through and updated their data collection for subsequent studies. They've managed to incorporate many of these types of techniques. And so what I'm going to be showing or talking about is the ability to utilize custom text boxes, again, targeting the audience that's going to use the information. For instance, I might want different data, and we're talking about data on the OneLine equipment data. I might want to display different data as I'm doing the layout or drawing the OneLine, as opposed to what's going to be presented when I print the OneLines out for my client, or I print them out for my maintenance team to do data collection or other maintenance on a specific piece of equipment. Most of the information we're going to be talking about, specifically custom text boxes, are a feature of EasyPower 10.0. Much of what follows will be included in Easy Controls, and so we're going to show how to use name views and separate drawings to isolate and focus the information presented, again based upon where we expect it to be used, whether that's internally or whether that's with another audience altogether. Likewise, the ability to use color schemes in the OneLine can be very useful depending upon what we're trying to convey, and a lot of times this can be redundancy that needs to be color-coded, or it may be the importance of a particular load or a set of equipment that may be require heightened attendance from my maintenance staff for whatever reason. It could be a safety system, or it could be life support, or whatever. And then finally, we're going to talk about the custom templates for symbols, which could be used to help set a brand image or convey a look for my material as I present it to my end audience. So in the time that remains, we're going to try to cover as much of that as we can. What you're going to see here in this example is effectively a large campus environment, and on my OneLine I'm going to create panes for each building, which will allow me to isolate it and remove or reduce the spaghetti factor as I have a complicated drawing. And I'm going to use the colors to indicate how that redundancy can be utilized or focused. And then you're going to see that when I use custom text boxes, I have a different need during layout for the information that's being presented on the OneLine. And it's relatively simple once I've established that template to be able to switch from that to, again, the template or the database that I want to present to my client when we print out his OneLines. And then finally, the custom templates are available to modify the look and feel. So let's jump into this and see how we do this. Again, I'm working from Windows 10.0, much of what we're showing is available even in 9.8, but when we get into the custom templates, and you want to be able to utilize 10.0 for some of those features. So what we're looking at here is my OneLine diagram for a campus where we have a ring connection for the high voltage, the 13.8 kV distribution system that is routed to each of the buildings with a cross connect and disconnects where I can isolate buildings and supply emergency power if necessary. And all of that is useful in a number of ways. If I look at the entire OneLine diagram, I can expand out to my full project. And you can see down at the bottom, I've created these panes, which are basically areas that I've established a label. And so for this exercise, I'm going to bring down the information or populate the building structure for Mailer Hall, and then be able to isolate on it. So to do this, here's Mailer Hall, and I want to effectively start the OneLine depiction for this building thusly. So I'm going to use a switchgear wizard. Start off with 480 volts. We have low voltage power circuit breakers in this particular building. We're going to include the main circuit breaker, have 3 downstream feeders. Everything's going to be connected with cables. And in this case, we're using motor control centers. So as we build this icon here, and bring down, each building has the step-down transformer connected to it. And then I need to connect up my cable to the high voltage distribution point, which is going to be somewhere up on the top of the building. So bring down the connection for the 13.8, and you can see that it's understanding what I'm trying to do as we connect the OneLine. Now, because there are some important loads in this particular location, I'm going to highlight and color code this whole system red. I just select my my preliminary system, my preliminary building depiction, and go up to my color palette, and we're going to select red for this particular building. I'm going to zoom out, and now I'm going to drag this down to be, because I have this selected, once I display the quad arrow, I need to select it again because I'm kind of clicking around. All right, so I want to locate it somewhere in the vicinity here, and then we'll zoom in a little bit just to kind of make it a little bit more official. Now as I start to isolate or fill in the details on the cables, I may want to do something like this. Open up the data dialog box for the cable, and let's say in this case we're using 4-aughts, and we have three sets or 3 conductors per phase, and let's say this is a 200-foot run and it's shielded. So we're going to calculate the ampacity and impedance, but we also want to prevent this spaghetti factor, so we're not going to show the entire line. So I'm going to uncheck this box, and by doing so, the tool stubs off that cable for us and now allows us to have the building wiring now isolated down in this one area. Now while I'm here, I'm going to go to my Easy Controls, Named Views, and I'm going to create a new one. And because I already had mailer hall set up, I'm just going to run it all together and reuse the name. Now, by creating these name views, what it does is locks in or records the pan and zoom settings for my OneLine, and now I'm able to go back and forth between the previous settings for the ring system, Sproul Plaza, Sproul Hall, 5K substation, and the mailer hall that I've just saved. All right, so this allows me to now have a cleaner look to my OneLine, and if I wanted to isolate this particular building, let's go ahead and create a single line drawing on a separate sheet. So I'm going to left click and select, create a special drawing. It puts it on a separate sheet, and we're going to call this. All right, so this is in my drawing package under drawings, and now I can go between the main OneLine and the other drawings that have been set up. Now, as we saw in the other Sproul Hall, I may want to put panel schedules on here. So just for now, I'm going to, because we haven't filled in the data here, I'm going to deactivate this, and because I want to start talking about the templates. Okay, so what we've just done is show how to set up a separate pane to stub off the cable display so we don't have a spaghetti bowl once we're through. I've used colors to isolate the particular features of this building for whatever reason. And as I look at my OneLine, at the entire OneLine, you can see now it stands apart from the rest of the system. And again, with name views, allows me to jump around with some amount of dexterity and be able to call up parts of the system as needed. All right, so the next thing I want to do is, and so the reason for isolating this was to fill in the data, but for now, I'm going to focus on the templates that we used in this other drawing. So I'm going to go to my drawings, look at Sproul Hall, and you can see here now I've set up and displayed the panel schedules for a few of these panels. For instance, here's panel 1. Now, obviously, I could do all of them, use a larger sheet, and that's part of the ability of the tools. But in these first 2 panels, I've used the default template for the panel schedule. Well, let's say I wanted to include arc flash information with this panel schedules. To do that, I want to go back to my main OneLine and create some of the properties, or change some of the properties for the panel display. And that's done under properties, again from the main OneLine. We're going to call this project Jimbo, just to keep something separate from anything else that's been done. And instead of the default template, I want to specify the panel schedule for a custom schedule that I've generated. In this case, it's an XML template or a schedule display that has arc flash information in it. So if we go back to Sproul Hall, you can see now on my schedule I have a new line that shows, in this case, symmetrical current. And if I go into short circuit focus, I could go into fault the buses, advanced, fault and store symmetrical current. And now as I zoom in, I see my symmetrical current that's been displayed for this particular panel. Likewise, I want to do the same thing, and so I'm in short circuit focus. I'm going to fault the buses, advanced, fault and store arc flash, and as I do that, my arc flash results for panel 1 show up. I have my arc flash boundary, the working distance, and the incident energy for panel 1 on the main bus. Now again, this may be something that I even may want to magnify or add additional information, but this is going to be displayed on any of the panel schedules that I've stored. And if for whatever reason I wanted to include more, I select a particular panel, right click, insert the schedules, and it will reflect the same information and format by using the custom template that I did for the other panels. All right, so let's go back to my mailer hall here. Let's go ahead and activate it. Now, as I start to populate it, I may want to have certain data displayed, and I can change the way that it's displayed. In this case, you see what's basically what has been a basic cable display for EasyPower. It turns out during layout, though, I wanted to customize it, or I may want something different. So I'm going to go back to my options. Again, this is in EasyPower 10.0. OneLine text, and I've developed a file that I call my design template, and I'm going to open it up and apply it. And in this particular case, I want to show a couple things both on my cables and on my buses. So let's start off with the bus. Turns out I want to be able to show what the bus rating is. So we're going to, as I select a particular bus display, the tool will display for me all the different data blocks that are available. I specifically want to put bus bracing in there, and I want to put the kiloamp rating. And so now if I have in that particular block, say 42K, the tool will show that on the OneLine as it's being applied here. Also, let's say on my cable, I wanted to supply or show the capacity, the ampacity, as I'm building the OneLine to allow me to avoid mistakes. So I'm going to find my rating. There it is in amps. Drag that into my label or my data block and type in amps. And again, it's going to show up just in this preview block just as I've typed it in, and clearly I have a. So now as we apply that, it shows up on my OneLine diagram. And so now as I'm making connections, I can see that this doesn't have a rating, and this doesn't either. So as I'm filling in my data, it makes me go back and say, okay, I really do need to have the rating for this particular bus included, or I can't get equipment duty. And so as I apply that, it'll display on my OneLine. It's a way of kind of keeping me honest, if you will, as I'm entering data and not having to go back and revisit it at the time. So again, this is something that I put in here primarily for my own use to make sure as I'm doing the layout, I'm completing the required data. Likewise, here I have a cable that's rated for 10 amps, and as I populate my motor control center and realize that I have something greater than that, I more than likely have either some missing data, or if we go back and look at it, I haven't clicked calculate. So this cable may be 50 feet long, it may be 350 kcmil, but we neglected to indicate that it has 2 sets per phase. And now as I calculate that, and apply, it will show that on my OneLine. Now, once I'm through, I don't necessarily want this information to be there. It's in the database and I'm happy with the results. At this point, I would go back and under my options, go back to my basic data block display, which I would utilize for presenting files to customers. And it has, again, a different set point. It probably wouldn't be this. I might have something a little bit more detailed. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're looking at cable display. And I probably want to put number of sets, so number of units per phase. I'm going to call that sets. And as I have more units per phase, this is what my display will look like. So let's see how that works down here. So this might be the way I want the data presented to my client after I complete the drawings. Okay, so what have we done in our 30 minutes here? We've looked at the utilization of a OneLine diagram that lets me eliminate a spaghetti ball display. I can isolate specific panes, both in their own drawings, and I can include schedules that can be customized to include more data than just the default information on a schedule. In this case, we included a short circuit fault current and the arc flash information for each of the panels inside the schedule. And as we go to our named view, because I want to start with my OneLine, now we can isolate on each of the panels that we've set up. And in my mind, I'd probably want to get rid of this one because it was a duplication. Likewise, we've utilized customized templates for the data blocks, the text blocks, and we've tailored it to our audience. We've utilized color to amplify or focus on either the redundancy or the loads. And then finally, if we go back to our main OneLine, we may want to have the ability to customize some of the icons to give our presentations a unique look, if you will. And I'm going to do that with our customized OneLine symbols. We've created a template. In this case, I'm going to borrow one that's been done for someone else. Apply this to our OneLine diagram, and now we can have customized logos and symbols presented that will be unique from the competition. Okay, so I think we've covered at least what I was trying to deal with. And as we close out, I'm going to see if there's any questions. And certainly, we encourage you to upgrade to Windows 10.0. If you've got questions on any of this, you're welcome to contact us, and or to be able to incorporate some of these features, you're more than welcome to contact tech support at easypower.com and improve your own presentation. Thank everybody for attending, and we'll talk to you down the road.